What's my IP address? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. As you probably already know, your IP address is the address or logical, not physical, location of your computer or router that is connected to the internet. There are plenty of sites that will tell you your IP address. In fact, any website you visit can see it. I'll show you my IP address, but I'm also going to show you a few additional bits of information that you're sharing with every website you visit. To do this, I'm going to use the article on which this video is based. You'll find it at askleo.com/10740. We can see that the IP address of my machine is currently 149.40.62.70. I will tell you that I have taken a step to not actually expose my true IP address. This is actually connected through a VPN. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you're not using a VPN, then yes, this is the IP address of the device you have connected to the internet. If you've got a single computer, it's likely to be the IP address of that computer itself. On the other hand, if you're behind a router, which is actually most likely the case, the IP address that's shown here is the IP address of that router's connection to the internet. Now again, what I'm showing you here is an IP address that has been obfuscated using a VPN. The VPN can still see my real, true IP address, but making my connections through the VPN mean that I'm exposing only the VPN's IP address to the websites that I connect to. Now, it's important to understand that your IP address is not private. It's actually a fundamental part of how information gets transferred around the internet. Every website sees your IP address in order to be able to send information like this web page back to you. Again, even using a VPN, the VPN knows my true IP address so that it can pass along the information that is being sent by the websites that I visit. Now, reverse DNS is something that's interesting to do on these. You'll see that in this case, my reverse DNS returns something called UNN-149-40-67-70.datapacket.com. That's actually a URL. It's a domain name. If something comes back that looks like a domain name, then you have a reverse DNS on that particular IP address. Sometimes you won't. Reverse DNS isn't always set up, and this will just return you the IP address itself. The reason reverse DNS is interesting is because it can tell you sometimes the ISP that is providing that IP address. In my own case at home, the reverse DNS returns something based on .comcast.net because indeed Comcast is my ISP. Now, you could do some interesting things by using Whois. Whois is a service that can tell you things about domain names. We often use the Whois service to find out maybe who owns a particular domain name like askleo.com. But in this case, whois.domaintools.com can also take an IP address and give you more information about it. So if we go there and prove that I am not a bot, here we can see that this datapacket.com is hosted in Seattle, so it's a nearby VPN exit point for me, but you get some information about it. Cogent Communications is the owner. Here's who you could report problems to. This is where they live, that kind of thing. You may find interesting information about your own IP address if you do this same reverse lookup. Now, what's important here is that there are many services that are similar to this kind of Whois information that will claim to tell you where the IP address is physically. Now, I'm not going to show you any of them because they are all notoriously inaccurate. Frequently, the only thing they get right is the country, which, while useful, is not even close to the actual location of that IP address, router or computer. In my case, when I look it up on my own IP address, it's typically dozens, if not hundreds of miles off. Now, there is still more information that's being exposed. Let's have a look. The user agent string. In my case, that is actually a very long, complicated string of information. But what it's telling the website is this is the browser I'm using. In fact, this is the browser I'm using along with a little bit of additional information about exactly how that browser is set up. You can see it's also including the fact that I'm running Windows 10. It's a 64-bit Windows and so forth. So there is interesting information about the browser that you're using and often other characteristics of your connection included in the user agent string. Now, the referrer string. This is less interesting than it used to be. This is essentially the page that I was on before I went to this current page showing you my IP address. So I started on askleo and I clicked the link that came to what is my IP address. It sounds kind of boring. It is kind of interesting when it's provided. It's not always provided. It does tell website owners where the clicks are coming from, how people are finding you. It used to be really interesting in that if you were to click on a link in a search engine that would say bring you to this page, the referrer string would not only say it came from Google, but it would also say here are the search terms that this person was looking for at the time. Unfortunately for website owners like me, but perhaps fortunately for your privacy, most search engines no longer provide this information. They actually strip it out before sending links to us, simply because it's a privacy issue. While we're here, I also want to talk about what are called special IP addresses. These are IP addresses that honestly you'll never see on the internet, but you may see elsewhere. For example, a lot of these are common if you look at the IP address of your computer instead of the IP address of your router's internet connection. I have fired up Windows command prompt. If I go ipconfig, that will show you that my IP address is 10.2.0.2. That IP address, something beginning with 10, for example, will not show up on the actual internet. It's what's called a local IP address. These are used on local networks not directly connected to the internet. If you use a router, and it's likely you do, your device is going to have an IP address on one of these ranges. Mine happen to be on a 10 dot range, but there are 172 dot certain ranges, and of course you've probably already seen the common 192.168 range, which is assigned very frequently by consumer-grade routers. Other IP addresses you'll never see on the internet, 127.0.0.1. That is a special IP address that refers specifically to the machine that it's on. It allows a machine to make a network connection essentially to itself. It sounds silly, but in reality, it can be a very useful way for some pieces of software to do the jobs that they need to do. And of course, the 169.254 IP address range, which is essentially Windows or other machines saying, I asked my router for an IP address and I never heard back. I'm just going to randomly assign this IP address so I at least have one. But chances are things aren't going to work simply because the router didn't respond in the way the router was supposed to. So your IP address is actually an interesting and useful piece of information at times when you're tracking down an issue. Most importantly, I think it's really good to know what kind of information you're also presenting to every website you visit, including askleo. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/10740. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.